Has none returned to give thanks but this foreigner? You know, back when I was in 8th grade, back in the early 1960s, there was men's fast pitch softball was still a thing, and I was trying to be a pitcher, and this guy in the other class, Bob Krzyzewski, said, "Hey Charles, look at this is how you throw a knuckleball." And I ran to show my dad. My dad was not amused. You see, my dad was a state champion softball pitcher who pitched against a couple world champion teams at the time, but I didn't appreciate it. He was my dad after all. I didn't appreciate what I had, and I put more merit in some classmate of mine than I did my own father. You see, it's too familiar. It has to be more exotic. There was a gift of my dad's, there was a gift of my dad's knowledge, free in the midst for my taking. But at that moment, I just didn't see it. When I was at St. Elizabeth Parish in Wyandotte, we had all kinds of miracles. 4th stage cancer suddenly disappearing, back straightening up, grapefruit-sized tumors disappearing, and good teaching. We had prayer group every week, and we had charismatic healing mass every other month. On our best days, we had perhaps 100 people show up. However, when a guest speaker came in from outside on some esoteric topic, we would fill the church. There were miracles and healings on the parish every day. But for so many folk, it was part of the furniture. They took it for granted. And they no longer saw the day-to-day miracles as a gift. There was a sense of spiritual entitlement. Well, you see, the Samaritans and the Jews, as you well know, are mortal enemies. You never see them together or socialize. However, when you are beset by leprosy, you are outcast, and nothing else matters. "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." They have no human touch, no easy access to the synagogue. They are human outcasts. And in that tight-knit community, that is actually worse than the disease itself, is the social isolation. Remember back in the early days of COVID? People were intubated. They couldn't even have visitors. The only contact for a lot of folk was Zoom on a tablet, especially, for the last few days of their lives. Is it any wonder then if we recall that these lepers here call from a distance and hope that at least they'll get some recognition, some acceptance. But here's the kicker. If Jesus touches them and they're not cured, Jesus is then as unclean as well. And he's isolated from the synagogue for 2 weeks himself. So when Jesus sees them, he sends them to the priest. Now, why would they go to the priest? Well, if their skin is free of lesions, then they are free of their imprisonment, free to fully participate in society again. The 9 Jewish lepers, they go to the priest. Oh, well, and all's forgotten. They take for granted. They forget. They take what they've just received. The Samaritan has no priest. He's fully dependent on this foreigner. But he remembers. They're all cleansed. However, if you heard what the text said, he's the only person who realizes that he is healed. I've had people who who pray to God that, they're going to live different lives if they're healed. Some folks get healed and then they, go back same old, same old. They kind of forget, take it all for granted. Other folks turn their lives around and they get it. What's the difference? You got a lot of folks, alcoholics. They can quit drinking, but unless she or he joins AA or they seek kind of real in-depth therapy and healing, they're still going to be a dry drunk, an angry, self-absorbed person. The difference for the ones that are on the path to healing is to admit that your life is out of control. When you recognize, if I recognize, when I want to recognize that I'm in control of nothing in my life, that I have no control, then everything I have is a gift. And with a gift, all I can do is give gratitude. That's why, as I said before, biblical prayer, the 4 different types of, is primarily not asking God for favors, not even asking God for forgiveness. It is primarily praise and thanksgiving. Because what do you do when you're gifted? What can you do for the gifter? You just thank him, right? And that's all I can do is give gratitude. The Samaritan is a changed person. When you live the attitude of gratitude, then life's going to be different. So some true studies. Nuns who are happiest at age 22 when they enter the order were 2.5 times more likely to be alive 60 years later. Men who are stressed are more than 3 times likely to die a premature death than those who see life full of wonder and a blessing. If you look at the Psalms, and they're great about this. Psalm 136 in particular. It has a litany of all the saving deeds of Israel. From creation to deliverance from Pharaoh to get into the promised land. And after each saving deed, if you look it up in the Psalm today when you get home, the psalmist says, "For his love endures forever." So what if, sisters and brothers, if we were to make our own litany of thanks tonight before we go to bed? Think about it. With that realization, every person who has been in our lives, in the past, in the present, is a gift. Secondly, what about your own gifts and talents that God has given you? They're gifts that you've been able to use or are using to build up the kingdom of God, to be a blessing for others. They're only unknown to us. When I die, I have to give them back to God. Aren't they gifts that something to be grateful for? And then third, what about special occasions in your lives that sometimes the veil is open? Maybe an encounter with an old friend, something at church, in prayer, great music, nature, whatever. These are times when I experienced God's presence in a way that I didn't normally feel, and the veil was opened a bit. Wasn't that a great gift in my life? And yet how often, after I've experienced that, an hour or so later, I forget all about it. Move on to the next thing. Those are gifts too. So, all the people in our lives, gifts and talents God's given us, and occasions when God has touched us and opened that veil a wee bit for us, we are surrounded by so many gifts and blessings. Can I think of at least 30 gifts to give thanks tonight before I go to bed? That was a challenge. Would I ever, if I do that every day, would I ever take anything for granted again? Stand up and go your way. Your faith has healed you.